The story of a young tech entrepreneur facing criminal charges now. The 31-year-old is accused of fraud for allegedly trying to lure J.P. Morgan Chase so it would acquire her college financial planning startup for $175 million.
Many may have heard by now the popular term known as 419 scam, which is always attributed to Nigerian grifters, as if Nigerians have some monopoly on fraud. This term has been amplified to look like frauds and grifters are found only in Nigeria. But scratch a bit of the surface and you would realize that the fraud occurring in the Western countries makes the so-called 419 Nigerian scams pale. Let's take a look at how the Forbes magazine uplifts grifters as successful entrepreneurs, while their African compatriots are brandished as scammers and grifters. Hello and welcome again to the Edge of Politics podcast. Geographical Queen here with today's episode on the Western grifters, who are better recognized as successful entrepreneurs as compared to their African counterparts, who are referred to as 419 scammers. The Forbes magazine, as it appears, is gradually gaining the exclusive rights of their so-called enlisted successful entrepreneurs facing jail terms. Although the problem can't be wholly placed at the doorsteps of Forbes, but definitely Forbes have amplified this fraudulent millennial fame junkie process. We have been sold a vision of success that fetishizes youth under 30 years. But let's face it, how realistic can young people who dropped out of school with no vision or life experience become millionaires in such short periods of time? This 30under30 venture isn't just a list. It's become a mentality, a pressure to achieve great things before youth slips away from you. This pressure can lead certain ignorant but ambitious people to take shortcuts. And in fact, shortcuts are encouraged. Millennials, after all, grew up being told to fake it till you make it. Cash in now until you become a withered, irrelevant 30-year-old prune. If you exaggerate a little bit, that's not fraud, that's hustling. Until, of course, the Justice Department comes knocking on the door. It is this knocking that was heard on the door of 31-year-old ex-CEO Charlie Javies. The latest from the magazine's list to see criminal charges in April 2023. Former tech CEO Javies landed a spot on Forbes 30under30 list for her work on a startup called Frank in 2019. This project was described as Amazon for higher education, a catchy but completely empty phrase. Frank's mission was to help students navigate financial aid processes. It was apparently so successful that JP Morgan Chase will acquire the company for $175 million in 2021. And as part of the deal, Javiz was made a managing director at the bank. The entrepreneur shared the news on LinkedIn at the time, boasting that in just 4 years, Frank had grown to serve over 4.25 million students at over 6,000 colleges. What a wonderful way of Charlie Javiz riding high just a few years ago. According to the criminal complaint, in 2021, Javiz, as CEO, sought to sell her company to a large financial institution, touting it as a valuable pathway to acquire young new customers, the complaint said. When JP Morgan sought to verify that her company indeed had 4.25 million customers, Javiz asked her company's director of engineering to create an artificially generated data set. But the individual declined, the complaint alleged. Prosecutors said Javiz then hired an outside data scientist to create the synthetic data set of fictional Frank customers to dupe JP Morgan during the due diligence. To cover up the scheme, Javiz also purchased a real information for over 4.25 million students for $105,000 on the open market. But it did not contain all of the data fields, such as email and phone number. But she told JP Morgan that Frank maintained on its users, the complaint alleges. As it will turn out, after the sale of her company, those numbers of her million customer base were found out to be exaggerated. She actually enlisted a data scientist to make up these 4.25 million customers using bots. The problem will come up when JP Morgan sent emails to the million Frank customers to inform them of the new ownership, only to realize that barely 300,000 emails didn't bounce back. It quickly became clear that all the millions on the customer list were just some generated details. Javiz has been charged with separate counts of conspiracy to commit wire and bank fraud, each of which carries a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison. Javiz has denied all the allegations against her, but at the end of the day, the law will take its course. But let's have a look at Forbes candidates who seem to have drunk the fraud Kool-Aid. Javiz, however, as eagle-eyed Twitter users were quick to note, is not the first Forbes 30 under 30 alumni to suddenly be looking at getting decades in jail. In 2021, Sam Bankman-Fried, a self-described effective altruist, made the list. Following the dramatic collapse of his former crypto exchange, FTX, he is now facing a litany of charges ranging from bribing a foreign government to money laundering to making unlawful political contributions. His colleague, Caroline Ellison, the former co-CEO of Alameda Research, also made the list in 2022. Obinwani Okeke, a Nigerian national who operated a group of companies known as the Invictus Group based in Nigeria and elsewhere, also made it to the list in 2016. He was jailed in 2019 in the US for 10 years after he was convicted of masterminding a long-running business email compromise BEC scam that grossed an estimated $11 million. Another embarrassing Forbes alum is Martin Farmer Bro Shkreli, who was in the finance category of the list in 2012. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison in 2018 for securities fraud, but got out of prison in 2022 and immediately launched an investor newsletter. Whilst Elizabeth Holmes, yes, you know her, the one drop blood lady, never actually made the 30 under 30 list, she did headline the Forbes under 30 summit, so she qualifies to get an honorary mention anyway. So does Trevor Milton, the founder of a hydrogen-powered truck company called Nikola, who was on a 2020 Forbes list called 12 under 40, listing the youngest billionaires on the Forbes 400. Trevor Milton, the 38-year-old college dropout behind zero-emission truck maker Nikola Motor, joins the ranks of America's so-called richest millennials after tripling his net worth in less than a year. The piece gushed. You sure know how he got rich so quick, don't you? Yeah, you guessed it right. With just a little sprinkling of crime. Milton is convicted of fraud and was sentenced to 20 years for defrauding investors in June 2023. According to the tech entrepreneur Chris Buck, who tweeted in April 2023, the Forbes 30 under 30 have collectively raised $5.3 billion in funding. In reality, the Forbes 30 under 30 have also been arrested for frauds and scams worth over $18.5 billion. An incredible track record, isn't it? The first number comes from Forbes, and the second is Buck's own backup of an envelope calculation. But you can get a gist. The line between innovator and fraudster seems to have become alarmingly thin. Checking on these figures and the people involved, how does some minor scams in Nigeria always get the headlines when the issue of scammers or grifters are discussed? We should also make it clear that most of all these millions and billions projected by American news papers are just projections. The money doesn't exist anywhere. It's just over-exaggerated hallucinations which just drive people crazy for no reason. So what do you think? Are the Nigerian kids learning from their leaders in the US, or the African grifters are being unjustly accused? Just how is this not a 419 scam? Well, kindly leave your comments in the comment section below, and thanks for tuning in. I will be back with the next broadcast. Good day.